From disaster to done. The East Texas Restoration Report. From disaster to done.
If a pipe bursts in your home today, the actual liquid water is only going to cause, maybe 10% of the total structural damage.
Right, yeah. It's really what that water does over the next 72 hours that destroys everything.
Exactly. I mean, it migrates through these dark, microscopic spaces in your walls, and it can completely bankrupt a recovery effort. So I want you to imagine this scenario. It plays out thousands of times a day.
Oh, absolutely. Every single day.
You are fast asleep. It's a random Tuesday, like 2 o'clock in the morning, and a major plumbing supply line deep inside the wall of your hallway just fractures.
And there's no dramatic explosion.
No explosion at all. Just this violent, continuous release of pressurized water. And it's gushing unchecked in the dark.
Which is terrifying because you have no idea it's happening.
Exactly. So by the time your alarm goes off at 8 in the morning and your feet hit the floor, you aren't just dealing with a puddle. That water has traveled under the baseboards, it's soaked the carpet padding across 3 rooms, and it wicked up into the drywall.
Yeah, and the air in your home already feels really heavy, like humid and just wrong.
It's a devastating reality, and it fundamentally alters the physical environment of your property in a matter of minutes.
It really does. I mean, the immediate physical shock is overwhelming, but the true threat is this cascading chain of chemical, biological, and frankly, financial reactions that have already triggered behind the scenes.
Right. So the mission of this deep dive today is to explore the absolute mechanics of that cascading failure. We are going to examine the physics of what happens to building materials when water runs wild.
Because the clock is ticking from the very first minute.
It really is.
Yeah.
We're going to look at why that biological clock is ticking and how your decisions in those initial chaotic hours dictate your physical safety and, your financial survival.
It's just so crucial.
So to do this, we're synthesizing a really serious stack of authoritative sources today. We are pulling the raw, tactical realities of property mitigation from the East Texas Restoration Report, specifically their Season 4 master source.
Oh, that's a great one. And we're pairing that with the technical emergency protocols from ServiPro, right?
Yep, exactly. And to navigate the financial labyrinth, we are breaking down the consumer guidelines from the Texas Department of Insurance, or the TDI.
Which can be a headache, but it's so necessary to understand.
Totally. And finally, for the biological and health threats, we are relying on the strict environmental parameters set by the CDC and the EPA's flooded homes guidance.
When you cross-reference all those, like a restoration contractor's field manual with an EPA health directive and an insurance adjuster's rulebook, a very clear, uncompromising picture emerges.
They all kind of point to the exact same things, don't they?
They do. They all point to the exact same physical thresholds and the exact same hidden hazards. Disaster recovery is never just about grabbing a mop.
Okay, let's unpack this. Let's start the clock right at that 8 o'clock mark in our scenario. You've waited down the hall, you found the main shutoff valve, and the water has finally stopped rising.
So the visible emergency is contained.
Right. But the most destructive phase is actually just beginning, because water doesn't sit still. We need to talk about psychrometry, the actual physics of drying.
Yes. Because when the pressure drops and the pipe stops spraying, the water immediately begins seeking equilibrium.
Equilibrium, meaning what exactly?
Well, equilibrium is basically the driving force of all water damage. Water is aggressively trying to balance its concentration across every single material it touches.
So it wants everything to be equally wet.
Exactly. Like if you have a puddle sitting on a linoleum floor, the water is relatively contained because linoleum is non-porous. It can't go anywhere.
Right.
But modern homes aren't built like that. They're built almost entirely of highly porous, hygroscopic materials, meaning materials that actively attract and hold water molecules.
Okay, so I think a lot of people assume water just flows down because of gravity, right?
Yeah.
But looking at the sources, the real enemy here is capillary action.
Oh, capillary action is massive.
Because if you have a half-inch of standing water touching the bottom of your drywall, the porous paper on the outside of that drywall and the chalky gypsum core on the inside, they act like a massive wick.
Right, they just suck it right up.
Yeah, the structural voids inside the gypsum are so tiny that the adhesive force between the water molecules in the drywall is actually stronger than the gravitational force pulling the water down.
Which is wild to think about.
It is. So the water literally defies gravity. It climbs inches or even feet up inside the dark wall cavity where you can't even see it. It's like water is a master burglar. It doesn't just walk through the front door, you know.
Right, it finds the vents, the floorboards, all those capillary gaps to hide where you can't see it. And as it travels, it acts as a universal solvent.
A solvent, meaning it dissolves things.
Yeah, within the first hour, the adhesives holding your engineered hardwood floors together, they begin to re-emulsify and break down.
Oh, wow. So your floor just starts falling apart.
Exactly. And solid wood furniture swells. As the wood expands rapidly against its own grain, the tension causes it to physically crack.
That's heartbreaking. And not to mention the chemical transfer, the East Texas Restoration Report talks a lot about this.
Stains, right.
Yeah. If you have a solid oak table sitting on wet synthetic carpet, the water penetrates the wood and dissolves the natural tannins and the artificial wood stains.
And those dyes have to go somewhere.
Right. They leach downward, chemically bonding to the carpet fibers. You get an irreversible dark brown stain bleeding out from every piece of furniture. It permanently ruins the carpet within hours.
It happens incredibly fast. But the most dangerous aspect of this equilibrium process is really how deceptive it is to our senses.
What do you mean?
Well, if you spend your morning with a wet vacuum and an armful of towels, extracting all the visible water, the surface of your carpet or your drywall might actually feel dry to the human hand by the afternoon.
Oh, I see. So you think you fixed it.
Right. But relying on your tactile senses is a guaranteed way to lose your property.
Because my hand is only feeling the evaporation rate on the outermost millimeter of the material. Right?
Exactly. Inside, it's a completely different story.
The water has just migrated past the vapor barrier. But wait, if it feels dry to the touch, why can't I just trust my hands? I mean, shouldn't that be enough?
It seems like it should be, but it's not. That's why the sources specify, you have to look at the tools the professionals use, specifically thermal imaging and penetrating moisture meters.
Okay, let's break those down. Thermal imaging first.
So thermal imaging is vital because you simply cannot manage a hidden variable. A thermal camera doesn't actually see moisture. It reads surface temperature differentials.
Okay, so how does that show water?
When water is trapped inside a wall cavity, it slowly evaporates. And that phase change from liquid to gas requires energy.
Right, it pulls heat out of the surrounding drywall.
Exactly. It creates a localized cooling effect. The camera reads that really subtle temperature drop and paints a thermal map of exactly where the water is hiding behind the paint.
That's amazing. But wait, a camera can yield false positives, right? Like a cold draft from a window or missing insulation could look like a water leak on the screen.
Oh, absolutely. Which is why the protocols say you have to verify any thermal anomaly with a penetrating moisture meter.
Ah, okay. The meter with the little metal pins.
Yes. You drive the metal pins of the meter directly into the drywall or the baseboard. The meter sends a tiny electrical current between those pins.
And because pure water is a decent conductor, right?
Now, pure water is decent, but the dissolved salt in building materials make the water a fantastic conductor.
Oh, got it.
So the meter measures the electrical resistance. Low resistance means higher water content.
So it gives you a hard, objective percentage of saturation.
Exactly. It proves that the drywall that feels completely dry to your hand is actually sitting at, 99% structural saturation.
Wow. And leaving that hidden moisture behind is basically the equivalent of lighting a slow-burning fuse.
It really is. You can't see the flame, but a biological explosion is totally imminent.
Right, which brings us to Section 2, the biological threat. The physical breakdown of the materials really just sets the stage for a much more severe threat as we cross that 48-hour threshold.
Yes, the moles.
Yeah, and let's bypass the basic high school biology definition of mold here. We know it's everywhere. We know spores are constantly circulating in the air, riding in on our shoes and through our HVAC systems.
They're unavoidable.
Right. But the critical transition here is what happens when those dormant spores encounter that saturated drywall. We are looking at a fundamental shift in the indoor biome.
It's a massive shift. The environment goes from being a dry, synthetic structure to being a massive food source.
Because of the cellulose, right?
Exactly. The paper backing of your drywall, the engineered wood of your subfloor, it is all pure cellulose.
Mm-hmm.
When a dormant mold spore lands on a wet cellulose surface, it hydrates and begins to germinate.
It wakes up.
It does. And it pushes out these microscopic root structures called hyphae.
Hyphae.
Yeah. These hyphae secrete digestive enzymes directly into your home's structural materials. They break the complex cellulose down into simple sugars, which the mold then absorbs.
So it is actively eating your house.
It is literally digesting your home, yes.
Wow. And as it eats, it defends its territory. This is where the health hazard really accelerates.
The mycotoxins.
Yes. When mold colonies compete for resources or when they are threatened by changes in the environment, they release mycotoxins. These are toxic secondary metabolites acting as a defense mechanism.
Microscopic chemical warfare agents.
Exactly. And they become aerosolized, drifting through your HVAC system and straight into your lungs.
And the health implications of that are severe and heavily documented. The Institute of Medicine published definitive findings on this.
What did they find?
They linked indoor exposure to damp environments directly with upper respiratory tract symptoms, chronic cough, and the onset of severe asthma symptoms.
That's terrifying.
It is. And the World Health Organization issued really aggressive guidelines echoing these risks. It's particularly dangerous for immune-compromised individuals. They can actually develop dangerous fungal infections directly in their lung tissue.
Oh, man. So the defense against this is really time and atmospheric control.
Yes, speed is everything.
Because the CDC states unequivocally that you have a 24 to 48-hour window to dry the environment before this biological amplification becomes uncontrollable.
That's your window. After that, the costs and the damage skyrocket.
And the primary metric for victory here is the 50% rule, right? You must force the relative humidity of the indoor air below 50%.
Below 50, yes. Mold struggles to amplify in that environment.
But here is a massive geographical catch that the East Texas Restoration Report highlights. If you live in a high humidity climate like the Gulf Coast, opening the windows to just air dry the house is a physical impossibility.
Oh, it is worse than impossible. It is actively detrimental.
Really?
Well, think about it. If the ambient humidity outside is 85%, opening a window simply invites a massive volume of additional moisture into the structure.
So you are literally feeding the mold by opening the window.
Exactly. You require aggressive mechanical intervention to alter the psychrometry of the room. You can't just let a breeze do it.
But inevitably, people miss that 48-hour window. I mean, they go out of town or they don't realize the water wicked up behind a heavy bookcase.
It happens all the time.
And a week later, they pull the bookcase away and find this massive bloom of black and green fuzz on the baseboards.
And panic sets in.
Total panic. The immediate human instinct is to gather data. People want to jump online, buy a mold testing kit, and send a swab to a lab to find out exactly what genus and species of mold they are fighting.
Like, is it Stachybotrys or is it penicillium?
Exactly. Shouldn't I just buy a mold testing kit immediately to see what kind of mold I have? I mean, I want to know what's in my house.
You would think so. But the CDC guidance takes a surprisingly hardline stance against that instinct. They strictly advise against testing for homeowners.
Wait, really? The CDC says don't test.
Yes. And their reasoning is incredibly practical. First of all, the health effects of mold exposure are highly idiosyncratic.
Meaning it affects everyone differently.
Exactly. A spore count that causes severe asthmatic reactions in one person might cause absolutely zero symptoms in another person living in the same house. Therefore, knowing the exact species doesn't actually inform your medical response.
That makes sense. And more importantly, the EPA sources point out there are no established federal limits for mold spore counts in residential buildings.
That's the real kicker.
Even if the lab report comes back and says you have 2,000 spores of Aspergillus per cubic meter, there is no government standard that says 2,000 is a lethal dose, but 1,900 is totally safe.
Right. It is just arbitrary data. It doesn't change what you have to do.
Precisely. So the CDC's protocol is action-oriented. If you can see it, or if you can smell the volatile organic compounds, that distinct musty odor, it must be removed.
Paying an industrial hygienist hundreds of dollars and waiting 4 days for a lab report only delays the physical remediation.
Which just allows the hyphae to consume more of your drywall while you wait.
Exactly. The goal isn't to identify the mold. It is eradication and absolute moisture control.
Which brings us to the physical act of remediation. We understand the physics. We understand the biological fuse that's burning. It's time to put on the boots and get to work.
This is where things get really risky.
Yeah. Stepping into that environment triggers a massive shift in liability and physical danger. We are transitioning into the danger zone.
What's fascinating here is the psychological shift. People tend to view a flooded living room as just an extreme version of a spilled glass of water.
Like, oh, just grab a bigger towel.
Right. But the EPA and the emergency response protocols demand that you view it as a compromised hazardous demolition site.
Think about the concept of the incident commander. When a major pipe bursts or a localized flood hits, you might call the fire department.
Sure, they come and help secure the scene.
Right, the emergency responders show up, they shut off the water main at the street, maybe pull the main electrical breaker, and verify the immediate threat to life is over. But then they pack up their trucks and drive away.
And at that exact moment, the legal and practical authority transfers directly to you.
You are now the incident commander of a hazardous site.
Yes. And that carries massive liability.
I mean, if your well-meaning neighbor wades into your flooded kitchen in their sneakers to help you mop, and they step on an exposed nail or suffer an electrical shock, you bear the liability because you failed to control access to a dangerous environment.
That liability is exactly why safety assessments must precede any mitigation attempt. I mean, let's examine the electrical threat.
Oh, this is a big one.
It is. Clean tap water is actually a fairly poor conductor of electricity.
Wait, really? I thought water and electricity were instantly deadly.
Well, the water sitting on your floor is no longer clean tap water. The moment it touches the floor, it dissolves dirt, salts, and chemical residues from your flooring and carpets.
Ah, okay.
And these dissolved ions turn the water into a highly efficient electrical conductor. If an outlet is submerged, or if a plugged-in lamp tips into the water, the entire puddle becomes electrified.
That is terrifying, and that is why the main breaker must be secured before anyone enters.
Absolutely non-negotiable.
But the hazards aren't just on the floor. We have to consider the structural weight of the water above us.
The ceilings.
Yeah. If the pipe burst on the second floor, the ceiling on the first floor is absorbing that water. Drywall is relatively heavy when it's dry, but when the porous gypsum becomes fully saturated, its mass increases exponentially.
The structural load calculation changes drastically.
Yeah.
Wet drywall and wet fiberglass insulation can quickly exceed the holding capacity of the screws securing the ceiling to the joists.
They just pull right through.
They do. SerbiPro explicitly warns homeowners never to turn on a ceiling fixture if the ceiling is wet, because the wiring is compromised. But more importantly, stay entirely out of rooms with sagging ceilings.
Because a saturated ceiling collapse is catastrophic, it drops hundreds of pounds of wet material and wooden framing directly downward without warning.
Just boom, right on top of you.
You know, it makes me think. You wouldn't walk into an active demolition construction zone in flip-flops, so why do we do it in a flooded house?
We shouldn't. Which is why the incident commander, the homeowner, has to mandate personal protective equipment.
PPE.
Right. The CDC requires heavy rubber boots with thick treads. You aren't just protecting against mild electrical currents, you're protecting against slip and fall hazards on slick subfloors.
And sharp debris, right, like shattered glass or exposed tack strips from the carpet hidden beneath the dark water.
Exactly. You also need thick rubber gloves. But the requirement that usually catches people completely off guard is goggles.
Goggles, like swimming goggles or safety glasses.
Safety goggles that seal. You are going to be tearing out materials, splashing contaminated water, and potentially using harsh cleaning agents.
Yeah.
Your eyes are highly vulnerable mucosal membranes.
Oh, I didn't even think about that.
Yeah, aerosolized mold spores, splashing chemical irritants, or even just dirty bacteria-laden water can enter the bloodstream rapidly through the eyes.
That can lead to severe localized infections or systemic reactions, right?
Very quickly, yes. Goggles are not optional.
Okay, so now we are geared up. We have the boots, the gloves, the goggles. We stepped into the environment. We are racing against that 48-hour biological clock. This brings us to Section 4, the tactical triage phase.
The do's and don'ts of the first 24 hours.
Right. The primary goal is aggressive physical extraction. You grab the mop, the buckets, the towels, and you remove every single ounce of liquid water you can.
Because physical extraction is the most efficient phase of drying. Every gallon you manually extract is a gallon that doesn't have to be slowly evaporated by expensive machinery later.
That makes total sense. Once the bulk water is gone, you must isolate your vulnerable assets. We discussed the tannic acid and dye transfer from furniture earlier.
Yes, ruining the carpets.
The industry standard protocol to break that chemical transfer is surprisingly analog.
Aluminum foil?
Right, the aluminum foil trick. It sounds like a strange internet life hack, but the chemistry is completely solid. You lift the leg of the wet sofa or the solid wood table, and you slide a square of aluminum foil between the wood and the wet carpet.
And the foil acts as a totally impermeable, non-porous vapor barrier.
The water cannot wick up into the furniture leg to dissolve the finish, and the dyes cannot bleed down into the carpet fibers. Small, dry wooden blocks achieve the exact same separation.
It's so simple, but it saves thousands of dollars in damage. You also must physically remove any items containing water-soluble inks.
Like books or magazines.
Books, magazines, colored cardboard boxes. If you leave them on a wet carpet, they will dissolve almost instantly. They drive their inks deep into the synthetic fibers of the floor.
And that creates a stain you can't get out.
You can't. No chemical solvent can remove those ink stains without destroying the carpet itself.
Wow. And what about the ambient environment? If it's a Texas summer and the humidity is just choking, you need mechanical dehumidification.
Which is why their Servi Pro guidelines suggest turning the central air conditioning down to its maximum coldest setting, assuming, of course, the electrical system is safe and cleared.
I really want to break down why this works, because it's not just about making the room physically cold, is it? An air conditioner is fundamentally a dehumidifier.
Exactly. The thermodynamics of an HVAC system are perfectly suited for initial mitigation.
How so?
Well, as the hot, heavily moisture-laden air from your flooded house is pulled into the return vents, it passes over the evaporator coils in your central unit.
Okay.
These coils are filled with freezing liquid refrigerant. When the warm, wet air hits that freezing metal, the air's temperature drops rapidly. Cold air physically cannot hold as much water vapor as warm air. Its vapor capacity shrinks.
So the water vapor literally condenses out of the air. It turns back into liquid water on the freezing coils, drips into the condensate pan, and drains completely outside of the house.
Yes. And the system then blows cold, radically drier air back into the living room. It effectively acts like a giant sponge, ready to absorb more moisture from your wet walls.
That continuous cycle aggressively strips moisture from the environment, drastically lowering the relative humidity. That is brilliant.
It is. However, there are catastrophic errors people make during this triage phase. And the most dangerous is the misuse of household equipment.
Right. Let's talk about the vacuum cleaner. I have a heavy-duty household vacuum, a nice one. I'm staring at a soaked carpet, and I realize mopping will take hours. The temptation to just plug it in and suck the water up is immense. Can't I just use that?
No, absolutely not. Acting on that temptation can be fatal.
Fatal.
Yes, standard household vacuums are designed with flow-through motors.
Meaning what?
It means the air that is sucked in through the brush head, along with all the dust and debris, is actually pulled directly over the electrical motor and the copper armature to keep the motor cool before it exhausts out the back.
Oh my God. So if you suck up liquid water, that water is pulled directly into the spinning, electrically charged core of the motor.
Yes. It immediately shorts out the carbon brushes, destroys the motor, and crucially, electrifies the entire casing of the vacuum cleaner.
So if you are holding the plastic or metal handle while standing in a puddle,
You become the path of least resistance to the ground. It is a lethal electrocution hazard.
that is insane. So what do you use?
You can only extract water with a purpose-built wet-dry shop vacuum that uses a bypass motor. In a bypass motor, the liquid bypasses the electrical components entirely, and it still must be plugged into a GFCI-protected outlet.
Okay, good to know. The other massive unforced error during triage involved chemical warfare, specifically the misuse of bleach.
Bleach. People love bleach.
Because mold is the boogeyman, right? People assume they need to dump raw bleach on everything to sanitize the scene.
Bleach is sodium hypochlorite, and it is severely misunderstood. The CDC guidelines restrict bleach usage to a maximum ratio of 1 cup of bleach per 1 gallon of water.
And it is only effective on hard, non-porous surfaces like tile or glass, right?
Exactly.
Let's explain exactly why bleach is terrible for drywall and wood. Household bleach is about 5% sodium hypochlorite and 95% water.
Right.
The chemical structure of the sodium hypochlorite molecule creates a high surface tension. When you spray bleach onto porous drywall, the chlorine component cannot penetrate the microscopic pores of the material.
It just sits on the surface.
Yeah, it sits on the surface, off gases into the air, and kills the surface mold.
Which looks great to the homeowner.
Right, it looks clean. But the 95% water component has low surface tension. It absorbs deeply into the drywall, soaking right down into the hyphae.
The roots of the mold that survived beneath the surface.
Exactly. You haven't killed the colony. You have provided it with a massive injection of moisture. It guarantees a massive resurgence a few days later.
It actually makes the problem worse. And the chemical danger is even more severe if you start mixing agents.
Mixing cleaners.
Yeah. If you take that sodium hypochlorite and mix it with an ammonia-based cleaner, which is found in many window cleaners and floor detergents, a rapid chemical reaction occurs.
What happens?
The sodium hypochlorite breaks down the ammonia, releasing chloramine vapors. In poorly ventilated spaces, like a flooded bathroom, inhaling chloramine gas causes the moisture in your respiratory tract to form hydrochloric acid.
Wow.
It burns your mucosal membranes, it causes chemical pneumonia, and in high concentrations, it is deadly.
So triage is really about precision, not panic. You extract the water safely, you manipulate the psychrometry with the AC, you isolate the furniture, and you avoid catastrophic electrical and chemical mistakes.
Exactly. But while you are managing this physical crisis, you must simultaneously manage the financial crisis.
Which brings us to Section 5, building the claim. Let's say you've spent 12 hours neutralizing the threats. You are exhausted, your boots are muddy, and you are ready to start throwing the ruined, waterlogged carpets and warped furniture into a dumpster in the driveway.
Do not do that.
Right. If you do that right now, you are going to trigger a completely different kind of disaster. The Texas Department of Insurance and the EPA both mandate that before a single item goes into the trash, you must document the scene obsessively.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the transition from physical recovery to financial recovery hinges entirely on the burden of proof.
Because the adjuster isn't there yet.
Right. An insurance adjuster will likely not arrive at your property for several days, perhaps even weeks, during a widespread regional event like a hurricane. An insurance claim file is not based on your word. It is a narrative constructed entirely from verifiable evidence.
Better information equals a faster recovery. The adjuster cannot pay for what they cannot prove was damaged by a covered peril.
Exactly. If you drag a destroyed $3,000 Persian rug out to the curb and the garbage truck takes it away before the adjuster arrives.
That rug effectively never existed?
Right. The insurance company has no photographic proof that you owned it, no proof of its pre-loss condition, and no proof that the flood destroyed it.
So you have to take a breath, pull out your smartphone, and document the physics we talked about earlier. Take wide shots of the room, tight shots of the water line wicking up the drywall, the aluminum foil under the furniture, the ruined electronics sitting in the puddle.
This documentation is the absolute bedrock of your financial survival.
Okay, so once the claim is filed and the evidence is processed, the homeowner receives the initial payout. And this is the moment where the reality of insurance contracts causes massive friction.
So much friction. People expect to receive a check that fully covers the cost to rebuild and replace everything brand new.
But instead, they receive a check for a fraction of that cost. So what does this all mean? Let's talk about the critical distinction between actual cash value, or ACV, and replacement cost value, RCV.
This confuses everyone.
Yeah, let's say your 5-year-old washing machine was destroyed in the flood. You know a new one costs $1,000. You expect a check for $1,000. But the check arrives for $400. It feels like the insurance company is scamming you.
It does feel that way. But they are executing a precise mathematical calculation based on depreciation.
So how does ACV work?
A standard insurance policy initially pays the actual cash value, which is the replacement cost minus the depreciation for age and wear and tear. Your washing machine had a lifespan and you used 5 years of it. The remaining value of that asset is only $400.
It is exactly like crashing a car. If you total a 5-year-old sedan, the auto insurance doesn't buy you a brand new car off the dealership lot, right? They hand you the cash equivalent of a 5-year-old used car.
Exactly. The major difference with property insurance, though, is that if you paid for the RCV endorsement on your policy, you do have the right to get the rest of the money to buy the new washing machine.
But they don't just give it to you up front.
No, the insurance company utilizes a holdback mechanism. They hold the $600 of depreciation in reserve. They will only release those funds to you after you provide the receipt, proving that you actually went to the store and purchased the replacement item.
Or that your contractor actually completed the drywall repairs.
Yes. This mechanism ensures the funds are injected back into the property to restore the asset, rather than being pocketed by the homeowner.
Okay, that makes sense. But speaking of controlling the funds, there is another major hurdle that blindsides homeowners. You get a massive check for $30,000 to rebuild your entire kitchen. You look at the check, and your name is on it. But right next to your name, separated by the word A-N-D, is the name of your mortgage company.
Ah, yes, the mortgage company's inclusion.
Why does the mortgage company get to hold my money hostage?
It's a non-negotiable legal right built into your deed of trust. Think about it from the lender's perspective. They provided you with $300,000 to purchase a house, and that house serves as the collateral for the loan. When a pipe bursts and causes $30,000 in damage, the collateral is severely devalued. If the insurance company handed you $30,000 directly, you could theoretically take the cash, abandon the ruined house, and leave the bank holding a devalued asset.
Wow, okay. To protect their collateral, the bank forces you to endorse the check over to them.
Yes, they deposit the funds into an escrow account, and they essentially act as a secondary adjuster.
Meaning they release the money in partial draws only after they send their own inspectors to verify that the contractor has completed specific phases of the rebuild.
Exactly. It is incredibly frustrating and bureaucratic. But the TDI guidelines do outline strict consumer protections regarding this escrow process in Texas.
Right. Texas law restricts the mortgage company from holding your money indefinitely.
Yes. Once the lender receives the insurance check, they have exactly 10 days to contact you and outline the specific documentation required to release the funds.
And once you submit that documentation,
They are legally bound to release the funds within 10 days. Failure to meet these statutory deadlines can result in penalties and interest owed to the homeowner.
that's a good protection to have. There's another massive financial pitfall that TDI warns about, and it involves the very act of depositing a check. Let's call it the cashing trap.
This one is brutal.
Let's say the adjuster cuts you a check on the spot for $5,000, but your contractor tells you the damage is actually $15,000. You desperately need the $5,000 right now to pay the emergency water extraction crew. If you sign the back of that check and deposit it, you might be legally ending your claim, right?
You might be. This is a devastating legal maneuver known as accord and satisfaction.
How does it work?
Well, some insurance carriers will print specific legal language on the back of the check, right where you endorse it, or maybe in the accompanying letter. It states that the endorsement of the check constitutes a full and final settlement of all claims related to the date of loss.
So if you sign and deposit that check, you legally accept their offer as complete.
Exactly. If your contractor finds $10,000 of hidden mold damage behind the cabinets the following week, the insurance company will simply deny the supplemental claim because you already agreed the matter was settled.
So what should a homeowner do?
You must always obtain written confirmation from the adjuster that the check is an undisputed partial payment before you deposit it. Never assume.
Great advice. Amidst all these complex financial traps, there is one small, relatively painless coverage hidden in most homeowner policies: food spoilage.
It is frequently overlooked, but highly applicable if the water damage involved a power outage.
Yeah, most standard policies include a sublimit, often around $500, specifically to replace food that spoils in a refrigerator or freezer due to a covered power failure.
And crucially, this specific sublimit often applies without a deductible.
Which is awesome. But the golden rule of documentation still stands, doesn't it?
It always stands.
You cannot just throw the rotting meat and spoiled milk into the garbage and demand $500. You must open the refrigerator doors, endure the smell for 60 seconds, and take clear photographs of the contents.
Or at minimum, draft a highly detailed, itemized inventory of what was lost before you dispose of it. If you don't document it, they won't pay for it.
Insurance claims are often denied not because of bad luck, but because homeowners rely on bad science and terrible advice from well-meaning neighbors to try and dry their homes. Which leads us to Section 6, the fact-checking phase of our deep dive. We have to address the pervasive myths that circulate after a disaster.
Correcting these myths is essential. Acting on assumptions rather than actual policy language or building science inevitably leads to denied claims and compounded physical damage.
Okay, let's look at liability. Myth number 1. There is a massive storm. Your neighbor's 50-foot oak tree snaps at the base and crashes directly through your living room roof. The immediate universal assumption is that because it is the neighbor's tree, the neighbor's homeowner's insurance is legally obligated to pay for your destroyed roof.
And that assumption is almost entirely false. It stems from a misunderstanding of tort liability.
How so?
For your neighbor's liability coverage to trigger, you must prove that the neighbor was explicitly negligent. If the tree was healthy and simply succumbed to 100-mile-per-hour winds, the law categorizes that as an act of God.
Your neighbor cannot control the weather, therefore they breached no duty of care, and they are not liable.
Exactly. The only way they are liable is if you can prove they ignored a known hazard.
Like if the tree was dead, rotting, and leaning over your house for 3 years.
Right, and you have certified letters proving you demanded they remove it. then their negligence caused the loss.
Hmm.
But absent that proof, you are filing the claim on your own policy, and you are paying your own deductible to fix the roof their tree destroyed.
Okay, let's ask a tricky insurance question. If that same storm blew the healthy tree onto my car parked in my driveway, does my homeowner's insurance cover the car? It happened on my property.
People assume that all the time, but no. The TDI rules strictly separate the perils. Your homeowner's insurance explicitly excludes coverage for motor vehicles.
So what pays for it?
To repair the car, you must file a completely separate claim under the comprehensive coverage of your auto insurance policy, which is subject to a separate auto deductible.
That's a painful realization for a lot of people. We also see major misconceptions regarding the valuation of exterior structures. People assume their policy covers everything on the property equally. But fences and sheds are treated very differently than the primary dwelling, right?
Very differently. Fences are exposed to the elements constantly. They rot, they weather, they lean. Because of this, insurance policies almost never offer replacement cost value on fences for wind damage.
They are paid out exclusively at actual cash value.
Yes, meaning the heavy depreciation is applied, and you will only receive a fraction of the cost to build a new fence.
And what about sheds?
Detached sheds and detached garages fall under a completely different category called other structures. This coverage is typically capped at a hard limit of 10% of the main home's insured value.
So if your home is insured for $300,000, you only get $30,000 max for all the detached stuff.
Exactly.
Okay, let's pivot back to the physical science for myth 3. We know that if a house floods, the instinct is to introduce airflow. The myth is that you can just go to the hardware store, buy a dozen cheap box fans, plug them in, blow air across the wet carpet, and the house will dry out safely.
And as we discussed with psychrometry, this is fundamentally flawed and actively destructive.
Because evaporation is only the first half of the equation.
Right. If you blow a box fan across a wet carpet, the liquid water transitions into vapor and enters the air. But if you do not have commercial-grade dehumidification running simultaneously to strip that vapor out of the air,
the relative humidity in the room quickly spikes to 99%.
yes, the air reaches its absolute saturation point. It literally cannot hold another drop of water.
So all that vapor you just pushed into the air has to go somewhere, and it condenses directly onto the coldest surfaces in the room. The upper walls, the ceiling, the untouched furniture in the corner.
You haven't dried the house at all. You have merely weaponized the moisture. You spread the water damage from the floor to the ceiling and created a massive secondary mold problem.
That is such a good phrase, weaponize the moisture. So professional drying requires a closed-loop system.
Yes. High-velocity air movers force the evaporation. Low-grain refrigerant dehumidifiers constantly extract the moisture from the air, dropping the vapor pressure to pull more water out of the materials.
And HEPA air scrubbers filter the environment, capturing the mold spores and particulate matter kicked up by the fans. You just cannot achieve this equilibrium with box fans.
You really can't.
The final myth is perhaps the most insidious because it relies on our senses. If the smell is gone, the contamination is gone. People believe that if they wipe down the visible mold with bleach and the room smells like fresh lemon pine, the environment is safe.
But the absence of odor is never a guarantee of safety. This is heavily emphasized in both mold remediation and fire restoration.
How does it relate to fire?
Well, during a kitchen fire, the smoke, which is essentially aerosolized, unburned fuel and highly toxic corrosive particulate matter, is violently pulled into the cold air returns of your HVAC system.
So it travels far beyond the kitchen.
Exactly. The microscopic soot particles coat the interior of the ductwork throughout the entire house. You can scrub the kitchen cabinets until they shine, and the house might smell clean, but the toxic contamination is resting silently in the ducts.
And the moment winter hits and you turn on the furnace, the system bakes that toxic soot and blows the corrosive particulates directly back into your breathing air.
The exact same principle applies to mold. The musty odor of volatile organic compounds might dissipate when you clean the surface of the drywall, but the hyphae are aggressively thriving on the dark, wet paper backing inside the wall cavity,
quietly destroying the structural studs and releasing mycotoxins that filter into the living space through the electrical outlets.
Yes. Contamination remediation requires objective scientific verification, moisture mapping, and particulate testing, not just a sensory sniff test.
Which really highlights a larger philosophical point raised in the sources regarding commercial continuity. Businesses survive catastrophic water damage and fires not because they are lucky, but because they operate on a predetermined, business recovery blueprint.
Right. They don't wait for a pipe to burst to figure out who to call.
They have vendor relationships established, they know exactly where the utility shutoffs are, and they understand the physics of the threats. It is the triumph of systemic planning over sudden panic.
Knowledge dictates the outcome. The misconceptions we've discussed today slow down recovery, they lead to denied insurance claims, and they allow biological threats to amplify. Eradicating those assumptions is the only path to a resilient recovery.
Let's synthesize the sheer volume of information we have unpacked today. If a listener takes away nothing else from the combined directives of the CDC, the EPA, the TDI, and the restoration experts, what are the 3 unshakable pillars of surviving a property disaster?
The primary conclusions are absolute. Pillar 1, speed is everything.
The biological clock.
Yes,
Yeah.
you are fighting a biological clock, and you have a strict 24 to 48-hour window to manually extract the water and force the humidity below 50% before mold amplification begins and costs multiply exponentially.
Got it. What's pillar 2?
Pillar 2, safety precedes action. You are the incident commander. Never enter a flooded space without locking out the electrical panel, verifying the structural integrity of the ceilings, and wearing the mandated PPE to protect your mucosal membranes.
And the third pillar, photographic documentation is the currency of your recovery. Your financial survival relies on the burden of proof. The adjuster will only authorize payment for the damage they can visually verify. Document the water lines, the ruined contents, and the initial state of the disaster before you move a single item.
Recovery is rarely defined by one heroic, sweeping action. It is the aggregate result of hundreds of informed, methodical decisions executed within a compressed time frame.
That concept, that documentation is the currency of your recovery, actually sparks a final provocative thought to leave you with today. We have spent an hour detailing the physical reality of a disaster. The swollen wood, the dissolved drywall, the aerosolized mold, but we have to consider the fragility of digital disaster recovery.
The vulnerability of the information itself.
Exactly. If the TDI and the EPA state that documentation is the absolute bedrock of your insurance claim, how do you actually build that claim if the disaster destroys your access to the evidence?
It's a huge problem.
If your home floods tonight, your physical insurance policy might be dissolving in a filing cabinet. The receipts for your expensive electronics are unreadable. And the laptop where you store your digital photos and financial spreadsheets is short-circuited in a puddle on the floor.
If you lose your hardware in the event, you lose your ability to execute the recovery protocol. You are paralyzed at the exact moment you need to be moving fastest.
So the thought to ponder is this. Building a resilient cloud-based go bag for your property data before the pipe bursts is arguably just as vital as knowing how to isolate a water main.
Absolutely.
Do you have a highly secure shared cloud directory containing PDF copies of your insurance declarations, contractor contacts, and scanned receipts? Have you taken 30 minutes to walk through your home, recording a high-definition video of all your belongings in their normal pre-loss condition, and backed that video up to a server hundreds of miles away?
That digital foresight bridges the massive gap between suffering a catastrophic physical loss and actually initiating a successful financial recovery. It guarantees that you maintain control of the narrative, regardless of what happens to the physical structure.
It is the ultimate insurance policy on your insurance policy. Well, thank you for joining us on this incredibly deep dive into the hidden physics, biology, and financial realities of the first 24 hours of disaster recovery. I hope that after exploring these mechanisms, you look at your own home just a little bit differently today. Look at the drywall, look at the baseboards, and understand exactly what processes are waiting to be unleashed behind them.
And most importantly, possess the tactical knowledge to stop those processes in their tracks.
Because if you wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning to the sound of rushing water and you step out of bed onto a soaking wet carpet, the biological and financial clocks have already started ticking. Do not panic. Secure the power, put on your boots, grab your camera, and take command of the scene.
What's the first move? What should you do? smart